Wall Street has proven resilient in the face of the pandemic, while Main Street has suffered considerably with businesses closing and people losing jobs. We will take a look at this disconnect in the U.S. economy. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Despite losses seen in recent days, the stock market in the United States saw its best August in decades. Wall Street practically erased the losses suffered when the economy shut down in March. For more, we turn now to CGTN's John Terrett, who joins us from New York. John, the stock market took a hit this Tuesday, but overall, it is still going pretty strong. Put that into some kind of context for us.
Well, I like to say that the Dow Jones Industrial Average is a snapshot of the health of the U.S. economy at any given moment. If you want to know what's happening here in America regarding the economy, look at the Dow or maybe the S&P 500, but certainly the Dow, and certainly since it was reweighted in the last couple of weeks to truly reflect the kind of economy we have in the United States right now. It's also important, having said that, to say that the markets are not the economy, and the economy is not the markets. The markets are subject to way more pressures than just economic data, like political pressure, for example, in particular policy. So what's happened since we had the March lows, when I remember the Dow was down 2,000 points in one day, pretty extraordinary, and the Dow itself went back to the place that it was when President Trump was elected and then inaugurated, is that we've had a huge roar back, an absolutely extraordinary roar back, the quickest ending of a bear market in stock exchange history, and it's been led by the tech stocks and fueled by stimulus. There's so much stimulus out there that the money is literally washing around, and by the way, much of it is as yet unused, untaken up. It's been provided by the central bank, the Central Federal Reserve, and other US government agencies, and indeed international agencies as well. And the markets are forward-looking, so they don't look back at the jobs data, they look forward to what they hope is going to happen in the future, and they've decided that tech is very much the future. And I think COVID-19 has taught us this. This is not 2001 when we had the tech bubble burst and the NASDAQ went from 5,000 to 1,000 pretty much overnight. These new tech companies are profitable or on their way to being profitable, and they're certainly here to stay. The best example of that really is Zoom, because we all use Zoom to talk to our families now in the era of COVID, and indeed to our colleagues. Now, Zoom is up 460%, I think, in the last handful of months since the beginning of the year. Apple is up 60% since the beginning of the year, and the NASDAQ itself has had 46 closing highs since 2020. Now, in the last couple of days, there has been a feeling that all of this is a bit frothy, that things have been a little bit overbought, and it's time for a pullback, which is what we've been seeing. And I think if you have Tesla, for example, valued in market capitalization at more than Ford and General Motors and Fiat Chrysler, then there probably is time to take a step back, and is this really true? So Tesla today, by the way, Tuesday is down 21%. It's down 30% over the last week, but it is up in the course of the last year. And Apple is down 6% today, but it's up 50% since the turn of the year. Now, there may be some day trading going on, people stuck at home actually turning their attention to trading in stocks that led to the frothiness. The last couple of days when we've seen so much red on the screen could have been something to do with a Japanese bank and various options trading, which is very complicated to explain. But the next thing on the agenda will be the election. The markets haven't turned their attention to the election yet. When they do, and they're starting to do so now with 8 weeks to go to polling day, they will look at policies and not personalities. And so the question is this a bubble? And that's the one nobody can answer. Nobody can ever answer that question, Arnie, because you don't know if you're in a bubble until it bursts.
Here's the other question, John. The stock market has been able to recover from the economic shutdown, but what about Main Street? We just mentioned Main Street. Many people still out of work, businesses closed, a very different picture.
I know. Well, this, I think, is a very great worry. And here we're all in completely uncharted territory. We simply do not know the answer. Now, New York, where I'm sitting at the moment, just alongside Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, is officially open for business. But, you know, there's hardly anybody here. It's very, very empty. It feels like the air has come out of the tire. And I believe this is true in other big US cities as well. Now, in New York at the moment, there's no indoor dining. There is in the state, but not in the city. There's no indoor dining. There's no movies. I can tell you from personal experience, the commuter trains are empty. These things carry 10 or 12,000 people at a time. There's like 3 3 people in each carriage at the moment. People are shunning Manhattan for the burbs. Office space is empty, all but. People are leaving in record numbers. And I went to a party, in fact, at the weekend and spoke to friends of mine who've had offices in Manhattan working on Wall Street since they were 28 years old. They're now in their 50s. And they're not coming back here. They're telling their bosses, we are not coming back, as simple as that. We'll come into Manhattan 1 day a week if you want. And in fact, one of them leads a team of 6 people. He's just closed an enormous financial deal. And the team that he leads did it all on text and WhatsApp and WeChat and email. So that is the big change that we face. There are hardly any tourists in this city at the moment. It's staggering to see how empty it is because there are no tourists here. And of course, we're awaiting further stimulus to try and help those who do want to work. The Senate is back on Tuesday, so something may come quite soon. But I can tell you, there are plenty of people in America all across the country who really want to go back to work, but they can't because they've been furloughed, or their companies are closed, or they're running on skeleton staff. And that's particularly true of the hotels and the restaurants. We're expecting many restaurants to go before the end of the year. And of course, the airlines as well. They run out in October of federal money, and we're expecting lots and lots and lots of layoffs to come in the course of the next couple of months. And that is where the uncertainty creeps in between what I'm reporting on the stock market and what I see with my own eyes here in Manhattan.
Right, not a pretty picture, John. John, thanks so much. That's John Terrett reporting for us from New York. Well, now to discuss this divide in the U.S. economy, let's bring in our panel. From Los Angeles via Skype, Mei Zhang is founder and CEO of the travel agency Wild China. Also from Los Angeles via Skype, Ryan Patel is a global business executive. Joe Minerick is a senior vice president and director of research at the Committee for Economic Development. He joins us right here in Washington, D.C. And from Massachusetts, William Cohen is an author of books on Wall Street and a former investment banker. Thank you to all of you for joining us. William Cohen, let me start with you. And it's that question that we posed at the top of the show, the disconnect between Main Street and Wall Street. You know, we have people losing their jobs, the economy in recession, retailers are struggling, yet Wall Street, the general trajectory is up. How do you explain that?
Well, I think that the whole design of the system, the Wall Street system, which is backstopped by the Federal Reserve, is designed to help those companies that can access the capital markets. So that's all the big companies that John was discussing in his opening comments. That's whether it's Tesla or Boeing or Apple or whatever. These are companies that are big. They get access to capital anywhere they want. They can access the capital markets, and the Fed is there to help them do that. And the Fed really pulled out all the tools in its toolbox in mid-March to make all of this happen. Then there are all these hundreds and thousands of small and medium-sized businesses in this country that employ, who knows, fewer than 100 people each that cannot access the capital markets, that cannot go to a bank and get money. And they're the ones struggling now. And so there's a large disconnect in the way that the actual system is designed to benefit big companies that can get access to the capital markets and really have collateral damage, unfortunately, among the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of smaller companies that cannot get access to that capital. And we are in a capitalistic society, and the reason, companies need capital to grow and to hire people and to build new plant and equipment. If they can't get that capital, then they really can't stay in business.
Ryan Patel, since the recession started, the alphabet, of all things, has been invoked to describe a perspective, a possible recovery. We've talked about a V-shaped recovery, a W-shaped recovery. Now you can add one more letter to that. Let's listen to what Joe Biden had to say.
Economists are starting to call this recession a K-shaped recession, which is a fancy phrase for what's wrong with everything about Trump's presidency. The K means those at the top are seeing things go up, and those in the middle and below are seeing things go down.
So, Ryan, that's not new, isn't it? We've seen the income gap and the wealth gap widen, and that started happening long before Trump came to office.
Well, Yeah, I mean, we're at all kinds of alphabet at this point. I mean, I think what Biden is saying, and I think what's different is if you think about the price of Wall Street and where people thought at the end of the last year that they were pricing recession coming in, and I think what the coronavirus has done, especially in the U.S. in March, you've seen the lower income households are going to get hit harder because of, as you mentioned, those stimulus packages kind of barely keeping these companies afloat. And so the longer this goes, let's just be clear, the GDP numbers and the hard facts for the economy for the US, it is down compared to last year. So let's not forget that as well. So I think the perspective here is, can the recovery happen faster? And because of the long-term effects, which I think is happening because of coronavirus and it is a global pandemic, not just a local domestic thing, it could have a longer impact for manufacturing, retail. I mean, we've already seen it in retail, but is how long is it going to go? And I think that's what the unknown here is. How can the recovery at all levels, but specifically small businesses, can they continue to survive? You know, we're coming in the fourth quarter where a lot of stimulus package money is now done. And so it'll be very interesting to see what the recovery shape looks like on whatever it becomes. I think it is an uphill battle for whatever letter you want to use.
Ryan, what about the fact that many of these big corporations that got huge chunks of the stimulus package got them on condition that they pay salaries, that they keep their people in employment? Has that not eased the pressure at the bottom?
It has to a certain degree. I mean, if you think about yes, there's a requirement that they have to keep them as jobs, and I don't disagree with that. You know, what I'm starting to see in some of these companies is that, well, when the money's gone, what's the first step that they're going to do? What is it's gonna trickle down. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if you don't have a plan to, and again, some of the major companies like Google and Apple and even United Airlines and Delta, who've come out and stated like we're not going to decrease furthermore, you got to really have a strategic plan. I think the unfortunate thing is when you think about the SME companies, they don't have the luxury of keep burning through capital, of a 50% reduction of workforce and then further going down.
Joe Minerick, just to add one more element of uncertainty to the mix that we're seeing right now, the Congressional Budget Office last week said that the U.S. national debt will be bigger than the entire economy of the United States next year. What impact will that have?
Well, there's no specific effect when that 100% line is crossed. The risk that we face, and it at this point seems like a very remote risk, is that at some point in the future, if the economy does begin to grow and interest rates rise, the cost of servicing that debt is going to increase very rapidly. We'd all like to see that economic growth. The 100% is not itself a tripwire that is going to open or close the circuit, but we'll be running a risk, and in the future, the federal government will have to collect more in taxes to pay interest. Those interest payments are not productive in terms of the economy. They just keep us legal, and they will eventually prove to be a drag on economic growth and on business investment.
Mei Zhang, let's look at what it's like at the coalface. You run a small business, a travel agency, and we've seen small businesses over the last few months. They've taken a hammering since the pandemic began. So tell us about your experience.
It was really interesting to listen to the previous speakers. I think I'm definitely on the wrong leg of the K, or in the wrong industry, the one that's going down. If you were in my line of work, we have this group of women in travel business in the Bay Area. I've never heard such dire sort of voice of saying, when is this going to end? It's grim for small businesses. Whatever is happening in the stock market or capital market or at the Fed level, at the micro level, what we are experiencing day to day is a picture that I hope one day we'll see some hope.
Now, if we look at the very severe restrictions on travel right now, and the ability for people even to move around the country very easily, I mean, how long can an agency like yours sustain it? And you are involved in international travel.
Well, I'm involved in China travel in particular. So we've been, if they say well, in the soccer playing, we've been playing the first half when China was experiencing the peak of COVID, and the second half when the world is experiencing COVID. So since January to now, we've had basically no travelers going from the United States to China, and that is a detrimental blow. And we've been able to sustain on half pay, but the question is how long can you go on? And this half pay is really tightening up rope to keep going.
William Cohen, getting back to the stock market, and something you said earlier on about the Fed coming to the rescue of big corporations. This is what one analyst said. Let's listen to what he said.
Every time markets start to show weakness, buying comes in. I believe there's been a mandate behind closed doors from our Fed and other central banks around the world to hold this market steady by to keep buying, knowing that on the other side of this, the Fed will provide favorable rates and will provide favorable liquidity.
So, William, are the scales then tilted in favor of these big corporations, and does that need to change?
Well, of course it needs to change, because it isn't right that small and medium-sized businesses literally suffer while big businesses, can prosper, and the people who own those big businesses can, see their wealth expand dramatically. Look at, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, or Tesla, or Amazon. These companies have exploded in value this year. Jeff Bezos is almost worth $200 billion. Something's not right when the Fed has to come to the rescue. This is the second time in 12 years, thinking back to the 2008 recession, the financial crisis, where the Fed really has had to rescue then Wall Street, now big business. The Fed has just done extraordinary things, which proves to me that the Fed is capable of doing more than its mandate would say on inflation and unemployment. It can do pretty much whatever it wants. So therefore, why not try to take care of small and medium-sized businesses the same way that you've obviously gone out of your way to help big businesses? Something does need to change, because it's just inequitable.
So, William, as you say, the Fed can do that. Why are they not doing it then?
They're stuck in this mentality of they think that their glorious mandate, is to just try to regulate inflation and unemployment. But as we saw during the 2008 financial crisis, they also managed to make trillions of dollars available. They're doing it again now to big banks, who then theoretically on-loan that to other big corporations. It's the small and medium-sized businesses that lose out in this scenario. But the Fed has shown that under an emergency situation, it can do pretty much whatever it wants. So why not begin to make capital available to all sorts of small and medium-sized businesses? Why not think outside the box for once, instead of just trying to protect big businesses and big banks?
Joe Minarek, of course, all of this is inextricably linked to politics, and we've got an election coming up in just under 2 months. So do you see some of what is going on as a tactic by Donald Trump to make sure that those Wall Street numbers keep going in that upward direction because they're favorable to him?
This is a really difficult question. The Federal Reserve can lend. It cannot spend. And what the smaller and medium-sized industries need is spending rather than lending. For many smaller firms, if you said to them, I will give you a loan at a low interest rate, if in exchange you keep your payroll on and keep people working, and you pay the rent, and then later on, you have to pay me back that loan. And in addition, you're going to have to pay the rent next month. For many businesses, that's not a deal that they can accept. For smaller and medium-sized businesses, there really is a dividing line here between businesses that have capital they can draw down and other businesses that don't. And if we want to help the businesses that don't have capital they can draw down, we have to do that on the spending side. And that requires the White House and the Congress to cooperate on legislation that will make funding available, like what we did with the Paycheck Protection Program the first time around, where they were loans, but they were forgivable. And as a result, firms could keep payroll on and not lose out by having a liability that they then have to service later on. This is probably much more a spending problem than it is a lending problem.
Ryan, last Sunday, the U.S. Treasury Secretary was on one of the Sunday political talk shows. There was Steve Mnuchin, and he said the president, and I'm quoting here, the president couldn't be more pleased with the way the economic plan is working. But still, we have 22 million jobs lost between February and April that have not returned. So what do you make of the White House priorities?
Well, I mean, you and I both know what that quote is. It's about a political run for November, trying to not say to go against the facts, but I mean, no offense, the economy isn't where they would I don't think it's where they want it to be, truthfully, right? I mean, they were touting, compared this time last year, how it was going up. We are on a little lower position, if not worse position, going into the election year. And again, I think it is a worry. I think part of this, too, is the stimulus of, the unemployment rate obviously is not where it should be. The consumer confidence rate, too, is something that's in there. And the disconnect with Wall Street and obviously companies is there's winners and losers in this. There's always in any of these outcomes. And for those companies that were digitally transformed and ready to go when March hit, it is, you think about who's winning. Think about Zoom. You think about Netflix. You think about Amazon. These companies are on the up, and a lot of tech stocks that were driving the valuations of many of the Wall Street. And again, what happens to that when November comes and when there needs to be a plan of how you really dig the rest of this company's and economy for a growth plan for next year, that to me is rhetoric that I would want to hear both from Trump and from Biden in this strategy plan to get the U.S. to where they needs to, versus saying, well, everything's okay, because we both know that it's not okay. We still have to get in the recovery process.
Mei Zhang, we were talking a moment ago about the challenges that you face as a small business owner, but I mean, things like salaries for your staff. I mean, have you managed to keep your staff on?
Yeah, yes, in fact, we've put everybody on 50% of the pay. But I do want to echo what the previous speaker said about capital is very helpful for larger businesses, but for very small businesses, it's the business flow that matters more than anything, right? I can keep the staff on, I can keep myself on for how long if there's no business, and if I get a loan to keep paying salaries with no assurance of when would travelers buy a plane ticket again, when would they go to China, when would they go to Peru, if they don't resume traveling, I cannot see how to keep this business going, right? And so in a way, I wonder whether this is Fed that can help us, or CDC, or the government telling people to wear masks. It's really building that traveler confidence for my specific sector. It's building traveler confidence and getting COVID-19 under control. That is much more fundamental to me as a small business owner than talking about the next loan of $1 million.
Right, and I guess, it's that kind of uncertainty that's hurting people in most other sectors as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of small businesses, restaurant owners feel the same way.
Right. William Cohen, you wrote a piece, an article in which you discussed the U.S. national debt and the federal budget deficit, and you say that is not scaring Wall Street. So what does that tell us? Do people still have, and the world for that matter, have a lot of confidence in the U.S. economy?
Well, the U.S. dollar is still the global currency of exchange. The Fed is able to print money, so to speak. They're also able to go into the markets and buy up trillions of dollars of debt, lowering interest rates. So, it's a situation where, because interest rates are so low, the cost of servicing the debt is also low. On the other hand, we're talking about budget deficits, federal budget deficits of nearly $4 trillion this year, obviously resulting from the stimulus that was needed to help with COVID, and perhaps another stimulus package that's needed. But now, when we start talking about $26 trillion of debt, $4 trillion of deficits under Republican politicians, this is fiscal irresponsibility. Wall Street is okay with it because interest rates are so low, and we can just continue to roll over this debt as long as the dollar is the world's currency. But at some point, you're going to have to pay all this debt off, and that's going to come a cropper soon.
Joe and Eric, one other point. With so many people out of work right now, and with others who are still in work but getting a lower rate of income, what does that do to consumer spending, and how will that impact the economy?
Well, we're about to see some of the impact on consumer spending. We had the enhanced unemployment benefits through the end of July. That helped a lot of the people who lost their jobs and were on reduced incomes to keep their consumption up for a while. With the elimination of that additional unemployment compensation, and keep in mind that that is essential not only for regular workers with low wages, but also for the self-employed and for contract workers who in the past were not covered by unemployment compensation at all and have lost substantial parts of their income. With that benefit gone, there is going to be a hit to consumer spending. Now, this is for, generally speaking, a low-wage or relatively low-income segment of the U.S. population, but that is a part of the consumption that supports the major corporations that we've been talking about. So in the next few months, absent action by the Congress, that pain will be felt.
Ryan, very quickly, I've got about a minute left. Many commentators, analysts talk about a return to normalcy after the pandemic, the post-pandemic period that they refer to. But I'm wondering, will we ever return to that? Because I was talking to a journalist friend of mine in Atlanta last week, and she said, you know what, I'm working from home. I don't think I'm ever going to go back to the office.
Easy answer, no. There's a new normal going forward. The way we do business, the way we look at how we actually interact with different countries, economy-wise, it has changed. And yes, there'll be some similarities, but if you don't get along with that global mindset, you don't get along of moving away with this advancement in technology, which we got to really boost because of the coronavirus, of going digital, you're going to get left behind. So I think that you will see a new normal, whatever that is. It's not going to go flip switch to go backwards.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us on the show. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us. Hello everybody, I'm Anand Naidu. If you enjoy the thoughtful, engaged discussions you see on The Heat, you may also want to subscribe to our podcast. It's appropriately titled The Heat. Twice a week we take a deep dive on world headlines, talking to experts, journalists and others. It's a fresh, focused and intimate look at the issues that matter most. Whether it's the Hong Kong riots, the latest Middle East conflict or US politics, The Heat podcast gives the clear context needed to understand both what's going on and why. And what's best, we come to you. Whether you're at home or on the go, you can find The Heat podcast just about anywhere podcasts are found. Just search The Heat CGTN. Have a listen today and subscribe. Thanks.